Our next chapter, I believe, is an important chapter to begin to understand why we have some of the misunderstandings. We've looked at multiple topics that could help us understand how conflicts arise in our communication. We've learned about understanding the differences in our culture, high impact, low impact, our identity connections, our nonverbals, just an array of topics that we have covered so far. This chapter will specifically begin to look at conflict, how we can manage conflict, what is conflict, the different conflict styles, and how to put the management into practice. In advance, I apologize for the background noise. I'm in a busy city. We'll work through it. These are some of the objectives that we're going to try to focus on in the next 30 to 40 minutes. Conflict, as defined in your textbook, is an expressed struggle between at least two interdependent parties who perceive incompatible goals, scarce resources, and interference from the other party in achieving their goals. Some key points in this definition is an expressed struggle between two interdependent parties. Both parties must know that there is a struggle, and they must be interdependent, who are seeking incompatible goals. There aren't enough resources to balance this out, and one party and the other want to achieve their own goals. What are those scarce resources? So an express struggle conveys the idea that conflict does not exist unless all of the people involved know that the disagreement exists. If the express struggle is nonverbal, there may not be a clarity that there is some type of challenge. Interdependence captures the idea that people in a conflict are connected. So there's something we both want. I don't mean connection as in a personal close relationship, but there's something that connects you that you both are wanting. So perceived incompatible goals refer to a situation where it seems as if the goals of those involved are mutually exclusive, even when that's not the case. So the perception of scarce resources occur when people believe that there is not enough of something to go around. For example, money, space, time, whatever that can be. It can be a yard. Where does the yard divide, or which half is yours and which half is mine, and so on. It could be money. You know, you should be paying 50% of the utilities. So these conflicts are inevitable. Conflicts are going to happen, and the challenge is to be able to handle them effectively when they come up. Part of our goal as becoming competent communicators is being able to have success. We may not always have a win-win outcome, but there will be success when both parties have somewhat of a satisfied outcome. So when we think about conflict, we all have our own perceptions, definitions. Remember, for this class, we want to use the definition provided by our textbook authors. But many conflicts remain unresolved. Is it because the people involved fail to understand, accept, and acknowledge their interdependence. So, for example, I'm just focused on my own need and not focused on the other person's need. What do they have at stake? Am I the only one losing something, or are we all losing something? Give it some thought. And keep in mind, as we go through this chapter, a conflict that you might be involved in right now. It is important to face the facts, or look in the mirror, if you will, because oftentimes we think we know what other people are thinking, and that's the danger of mind reading expectations. Yes, it is a thing in communications. So MRE leads to conflicts often because it's problematic, because we assume that we know what the other person's thinking, or we assume that our interpretation of what they're thinking is accurate. We might give them the silent treatment. We might have a reaction where our emotions are not identified clearly. So it's really important that we understand that MRE is dangerous to our relationships, and that we have alternatives. As in previous slide, we mentioned silent treatment. Ghosting is also a type of silent treatment. It's a passive aggressive, so is silent treatment in general, a passive aggressive approach to avoiding something. I think that both of these are common. I think it just depends on personality, culture, family styles in communication. So, is ghosting or silent treatment beneficial in some situations? I wouldn't want to practice it or make it a regular practice, but I have found when I'm very angry and I don't want to say something I'll regret later, that I may take a moment to ghost someone for a day or two. Otherwise, I don't find it beneficial. What about you? So there are various conflict styles, and if you think back through this class, some of these might have come up in under different subjects. So these are default styles or approaches that we have to handling conflict. You may be more of one than the other, but we can all possess a little bit of each of them. So the first one is avoidance, and we can look at avoidance as a lose-lose, and it'll occur when people completely ignore or stay away from the conflict, physically or conversationally. Maybe the silent treatment. Accommodation is a lose-win. So when we entirely give in to the other person because we just don't want to deal with it anymore, it's easier just to let it go. That's accommodation. So in this case, I would be a loser if I gave everything up and the other person wins. Competition is a win-lose. So this involves a high concern for self. So in the previous example of accommodation, I gave something up. But in competition, I'm not going to give anything up, and I'm going to keep pressing aggressively, using passive aggression or direct aggression to get my way. So passive aggression occurs when we express dissatisfaction in a disguised way, whereas direct aggression, the attack is directed directly at the receiver. There's no holding back. So these are 3 of the, I believe it's 5 conflict styles. So let's move on to the next conflict style. But before we get there, this is a short video, again, you would go to the PowerPoint to get the link. I don't believe it'll work once this video is published here on this recording, but it will be available in the module on the PowerPoint file. So this short clip shows us what verbal and nonverbal forms of passive aggression looks like. And as you watch it, observe and compare to the people that you interact with, or even your own style of approaching conflict. And remember that all of these short videos, lecture comments, you can reference in your essay and in your final paper. Here we go. So we have the fourth conflict style, which is compromise. So it gives both individuals something of what they want. So we both gave something else, gave something up to agree so that we both are happy. We sacrifice something equally so that we can come to a happy compromise. Collaboration is a win-win, and I would say compromise could be borderline win-win in that we both gave up something, we agreed to give something up so we could reach a compromise. I don't consider it a lose-lose, but yeah, maybe it could be a lose-lose. Whereas collaboration is a win-win because we both are happy. We had a high concern for each other and for the other parties involved. And there is a goal to find a solution. So you can see that positive desire to find a solution that satisfies the needs of everyone that's involved. So as I mentioned previously, you want to think about a conflict that you might be involved with or recently had, and which one of these styles would have fit. Remember that your conflict style can be higher in one category than another, depending on the conflict. Because if I'm in a conflict with my parent, I might have a different conflict style as opposed to a conflict with my child. So there are 5 styles that we fall into, but which style should we use? And remember that you're not bound to just one style, but in some situations you may be stronger or lean towards using maybe compromise more than a competition. So keep that in mind. So your conflict style isn't your personality trait. So remember that. It carries across the environment, across the situation. And which one you will use will depend on the factors, such as what is the situation at hand, what are your goals, and what is the other person's goals. So a win-win isn't always going to work for every situation. I find myself balancing my conflict styles as an instructor when we're trying to deal with deadlines or questions or misunderstandings. It doesn't stop, it changes depending on the situation. So in our relational system, so now we're talking a little bit more about relationships. There is a complementary and a symmetrical conflict that occurs in our relational systems. And the complementary conflict style is when their partners use different but mutually reinforcing behaviors. So in a symmetrical, so that's complementary. In a symmetrical is where they use the same tactics in dealing with their conflicts. So an example could be, my son and I kind of pick at each other a little bit. We kind of throw digs at each other when we're having a conflict. They're not they're very subtle, so it could be a little passive aggressive, but that's how we kind of get through it, and then we get to release some of the stress, and then we'll talk about it. An escalatory spiral occurs when they treat each other with the same hostility. So we're both equally hostile, we threat and insult each other. That's escalatory. A de-escalatory is when one is withdrawn from the situation completely, where they cross their hands, they put their head down, or they walk away. An avoidance, if you will. And that's de-escalatory. Serial arguments are the repetitive ones. They're arguments about the same issue over and over, and these common causes and issues are problematic because it influences how we manage the relationship. Our behaviors, our personality characteristics come into play, and so our communication styles come into play. How do we use these different techniques? So in our relationships, it's going to be a little different than in general interactions. There are conflicts that serve a great good, but there are conflicts that are toxic. And it's important for you to understand what those destructive signs are. And Gottman developed something that is called the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And it identifies these 4 destructive signs, which are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. So criticism is a direct attack on the person's character. Defensiveness is what occurs in response to protecting oneself by denying responsibility or counterattacking. Contempt remarks that are belittling and demeaning, where our behavior just strikes back with a demeaning response. And then stonewalling is when one person from the interaction withdraws, causing the dialogue to shut down, causing the interaction to completely shut down. So remember that a toxic conflict by Gottman is the 4 horsemen, and it involves criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. There is a short video that describes the 4 horsemen, helps you kind of look at, do you use it, or how do others use it on you? How engaging in these styles can affect your relationship. Consider the antidote offered in this video and see if you can connect with any of it, and how can you connect it to other terms or concepts in the chapters of our book. Remember that the link to these videos are available in the PowerPoint file. Before we go into putting our conflict management into practice, we need to consider rituals. So they are behaviors that maybe we can call them patterns that are very real in our relationships. So we have a conflict ritual. They're typically unacknowledged. So they're things that we engage in every day. For example, let's think about a 3-bedroom with only 1 bathroom. So there's probably some conflict over the use of the bathroom and how much time you spend in the bathroom. That could become a conflict ritual. So once or twice a week, there's going to be an argument because Doris spent an extra 15 minutes in the bathroom, therefore Jessica's late to work. So these are conflict rituals. They're unacknowledged but very real, repeating patterns of interlocking behaviors. And rituals can cause problems when they become the only way relational partners or individuals that are closely connected can handle their conflicts. moving on to conflict management and practice. So how do we approach or try to approach a win-win in addressing conflict? So we know that we're not always going to have a win-win, but we're certainly going to strive for it. So we need to define the needs. We need to identify what is it that I want out of it, and what is it that's important to the other person. This is a really important step, especially in mediation. I don't know if any of you are aware, but there are mediation programs where you can volunteer, you can receive training, you can actually turn it into a career. I believe your local courthouse may have some information, but there are some mediation groups, and it's worth just experiencing it. When I was early in my bachelor's degree, I think it was my junior year, had an opportunity to volunteer and get some training and learn about mediation. It just opened doors about how I saw and understood conflict. So defining your needs by deciding what you need, what the other person needs. Share your needs clearly with the other person, so we're not trying to blame, use I language. We want to be very careful. Just focus on what it is that I need personally. And sometimes that's really hard because our natural approach to things is to blame others. We want to have a casual conversation about, okay, I understand that you may have taken it this way. Allow me the opportunity to share why I responded the way that I did. So being able to listen to the other person's needs and being given the opportunity to share your needs is very important. If that person doesn't allow you to share your needs, you can very calmly say, I really appreciate where you're coming from, but I honestly feel that I need you to give me an opportunity. We're not going to be able to move forward if I cannot share my perspective. And go into the situation with some idea of a solution. You know, have some ideas to offer. Remember that your ideas aren't going to be the only ones, but have some ideas. Discuss them. Provide other solutions and choose the one that works best for both parties. And then the next important thing is that you actually move forward and implement the solution and follow up. Make sure that things are being done. Is it working? Do we need to reassess? All of these are really important to having a success result and a win-win. This is a short chapter. It concludes our overview of our conflict chapter. Please be sure to look at the conflict styles carefully. Consider the Horseman's approach by Gottman, and take time to assess your own conflicts. How can you apply what you learned in this chapter to your personal experiences?